Hi, I'm Steve North from EASE, and part of our symposium on symbiotic ethics, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how symbiotic ethics relates to my own field of research. So the title of this very short presentation is Non-Humans, Technology and Symbiotic Ethics, the Challenges of Developing an Ethical Framework for an Emerging Research Area. So what does the term symbiotic ethics mean to me? Well, symbiotic carries with it meanings such as close association and mutual benefit. Considering close association, I would argue that our working group's use of symbiotic emphasises that we view as problematic an anthropocentric view of interactions between humans and other animals that prioritises the human's significance rather than recognising the dyadic nature of other such interactions. I wouldn't choose personally to emphasise the implication of mutual benefit in our use of symbiotic, as I have concerns that this may lead to a romanticisation of interactions between humans and other animals that may obscure the harm to non-humans behind a curtain of noble savages, everything having its place, and the full circle of life. Rather, I see our framing of symbiotic as recognising that two or more ethically significant organisms are in close association with the interests of the human not assumed to be preeminent, where in fact the priority given to their relative ethical significance would be fluid and determined at any given moment by the potential risk of harm to either individual rather than to an overall species or to a culture, both at the moment of observation and going forward into the future. This is not something we can just walk away from. So how does this relate to my own field of work? I work with technology, computers, machines, and how they relate to interactions between humans and non-humans. So by way of introduction, let's look at that. Consider a relatively new research field with a focus on the interactions between technology, primarily focusing on computers and all digital era technology, and non-human animals. The researchers working in this field, including myself, describe their work as being animal-centered and are attempting to identify some common ethical principles. By way of enabling that process of finding these principles, I started to ask myself some questions. First of those was, is it sufficient that our own studying of a process does not directly result in harm? If the eventual outcome of that process itself is harmful and potentially lethal to the other animal? And I decided my answer to that would be no. I'd argue that the term animal-centered, which as I said is considered fundamental to this new field, should exclude negative outcomes for animals, not just those outcomes directly caused by the researchers themselves during study, but also those caused by the studied context and process itself, by the thing that we're participating in or observing. The second question I ask myself, when we embed ourselves in the world of other animals, can we partition our own involvement, for example, our attempts to improve enrichment and welfare, and then walk away from the consequences of the practices under study? No, I said, I believe that researchers should grasp the perspectives of the non-human and appreciate that any research, all the contexts and processes within which such research is conducted, must ultimately improve the lives of the non-human subject. It's also difficult to defend the position that you can contribute to a non-human's welfare and then walk away from their greatest welfare issue of all, avoidance of being hurt or being killed. They've evolved to avoid being murdered. Violations to their adaptations impact on their welfare. Therefore, being killed is a welfare issue, and welfare considerations do not cease to apply just before their life is ended by a human. So from this, I abstracted some guidelines. These are my own guidelines. I would argue that researchers cannot claim to be truly animal-centered in their thinking unless they, 1, recognise other animals as being substantially, and I'll come back to that, ethically significant. 2, grasp the perspectives of the non-human. 3, understand the full context of the interaction between the non-human and technology, the behaviours expressed by the non-human, the physical, political, cultural and social landscape, and any other interactions occurring between other living agents in the studied environment, including, of course, the humans. 4, appreciate that any research, all the contexts and processes within which such research is conducted, must ultimately improve the lives of the non-human subject. So is it just the research that needs to do that, or is it actually that we shouldn't be studying things unless the actual processes we're studying improve their lives? 5, recognise that these steps are both a moral imperative and the only way to truly understand the subject of your research. And finally, I said I'd come back to my asterisk substantially on the last slide. By substantially, I mean that ethical significance, the ethical significance of the non-human is not just a passing consideration that may be overturned at a whim, nor is it something that may be addressed during fieldwork through the tick boxes of a research ethics form. It's not just about protecting the researcher against some negative consequences. It must be a serious, reflexive and fully documented attempt to view the non-human as having agency and as having a desire themselves to exist without pain, without harm and without fear. And that's all I'm going to say on that for now. I hope the rest of the symposium goes well. Thank you very much.